Welcome to 144,000 Teachers, the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. We invite you to enter into the menu of 144,000 Teachers in the library, where this study is about the biblical calendar and how we have been able to bring these data together for the years 2020 to 2030 by using the rules of correspondence of the science of astronomy and mathematics. We are presenting these calendars in two formats, monthly and pamphlet format, that you can save on a USB as it is made in a PDF form. We also invite you to visit section number 6 of the library for the biblical calendar and the data that we have used. And it is based on the moon phases for calculation, moon fractions for observations, and as well we will be showing you the computation and explanation for the year 1844, more precisely the Great Day of Atonement of October 22nd. And these particular computation are based on, of course, none else but the Bible. The first verse that we are looking at is Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Verse 4, and God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So day stands for morning, it stands for light. And we have also darkness stands for night, it stands also for evening. And the day always goes from evening to evening. As we look at this study that we have done regarding true education, specifically here in part 5, we do here look at verses 1 to 5. And in verses 1 to 5, we find 8 universal divine actions, such as God created, God moved, God said, God saw, God divided, God called. And when you look at it in all the verses, these wonderful divine actions are often repeated. We are looking particularly at the sciences of astronomy, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. And in the first verse of the Bible, first chapter, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, we find that beginning is time, which is the science of astronomy. Heaven is space, which is the science of physics. And earth is matter, which is the science of chemistry. And to calculate astronomy, physics, and chemistry, we need the science of mathematics. And we continue like this for all the verses of chapter 1, if you care looking at our study on true education, which we have the link here for you. It's in the section movement of our website, 144,000 Teachers, in the first section. Continuing with the Word of God, we read from Genesis chapter 1 verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So we saw how the Lord created the light, and these have been divided now for the day and for the night. And now it's for signs, seasons, days, and years. Looking at verse 16 of chapter 1, and God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, which we call the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, which we call the moon. And he made the stars also. In verse 17, God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And verse 18, and to rule over the day, which is the sun, and over the night, which is the moon, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So when we look at Genesis chapter 1, all the way here to verse 18, we can see that the Lord created the light, and then he gave them their purposes, as we see that there is the sun, the moon, and the stars for light. Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And here again we have the 7 day mentioned, which make up the 7-day week, or the hebdomad in Greek, and that is a group of 7. So it's very important to understand chapter 1 of Genesis and chapter 2, as it establishes the first basis for the biblical calendar. A week of 7 days, the 7th day we rest, and also that he has made in the firmament the sun, the moon, and the stars, which are for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Very important to remember these wonderful truths. Continuing with Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, now we read, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. This was presented in other videos that we have prepared, and this is to show what we call synchronism and chronology. And Genesis chapter 7 verse 11 is the first complete synchronism and chronology in the Bible, which is also composed of many more. So we're going to look here at the 600th year, which is a timeline, which becomes then the chronology. In the 2nd month, that's the month, and the 17th day is actually a complete calendar. We have a year, a month, and a day. Some people say the month, the day, and the year, but it's still the same. This is the first synchronism and chronology in the Bible, because the synchronism is the flood, when all the fountains of the great deep broken up and the windows of heaven were opened. First synchronism is the flood in the Bible with its chronology, which occurred on the 600 years of Noah's life, the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month. And this is based on the beautiful calendar that we found already in chapter 1 of Genesis, which is composed of 7 days a week. As we continue now, for further explanation, we come to Genesis chapter 8, verse 22, which is when the flood was over, the earth was dried, and Noah now and his family came out of the ark. We read, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. This is the promise made by the Creator to Noah and his family. He also made a promise there would never be a flood again covering the whole earth. But this is very important to remember, because people are doubting if this will remain until the very end of the earth that we know today. Yes, it will. This is the promise. As long as the earth remaineth, there will be seed time, harvest, cold and heat, which we call summer and winter, or winter for the cold and heat is the summer, day and night. This will remain. We continue. Psalm chapter 104, verse 19, the Creator appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth is going down. And seasons, as we have seen in other studies, is number 4150 in the Hebrew Concordance, which means solemn assembly, holy convocation, feast. It also represents the 4 seasons, but this is more specifically having to do with God's calendar. And as we look further, we see in Isaiah chapter 66, verse 22, another application that we need in order to demonstrate the biblical calendar. So far as you look, we have not started by explaining the calendar. We have simply given you some universal laws written in the Word of God in order to establish the biblical calendar properly. For as the new heaven and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, said the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. So this promise that we are reading here is for the new heavens and the new earth. And continuing with this wonderful book of Isaiah, chapter 66, verse 23 now, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, said the Lord. So this is another rule of correspondence that we need to apply, and that rule is that the calendar always is calculated from new moon to new moon, and from one Sabbath to another. This is when we worship the Lord. The new moon being also a Sabbath, though not a 7-day Sabbath. So we have here from the book of Genesis chapter 1 that we have seen, we have established a 7-day a week, which is the Hebdomad, which is the group of 7. We have established from the book of Genesis chapter 7 that there is a synchronism in chronology in the Bible, and more than one, but the first one is chapter 7 verse 11 in Genesis, which gave us the year, the month, and the day of the flood. So these are very important rules of correspondence that we need to remember. The 7-day of the week, the Hebdomad, the 7-day Sabbath, of course, is the day of rest. We entered into Genesis chapter 7, and we saw that there is synchronism in chronology to follow the year, the month, and the day. And of course, all the other wonderful truth we have seen so far for signs and for season in the heaven. So these are witnesses. These are universal laws. We cannot change them. We cannot make our belief to twist the Bible, but we need to apply the Bible and become our belief. That's the difference. We continue. In Exodus chapter 9, verse 31, among the 7 plagues in the hail, we find that the flax and the barley were smitten, for the barley was in the ear and the flax was bold. That means they were ripened, they were ready. But then we have also another verse in chapter 9 of Exodus, verse 32. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. So if we go from one verse to the other, we see that it's talking about the agricultural season this is happening in Israel, but it's not quite in necessarily Canaan yet. When we look at it, they're still in Egypt, but we know Canaan used to belong to Egypt. And as we look at Exodus 9:31, we see the season, barley, and the flax. Barley is a grain where the flax is a seed. And we see here that we have barley as the first grain that grew in that area to this day and in Israel. And then we have another grain, which is the wheat, and another grain, the rye. But these came after in another season. They were not grown yet. That means it came a little bit later. And as we apply these wonderful truths, we know that this will bring us to Exodus chapter 12, which we invite you to look for yourself, where the Passover, the 12 plagues, and then it brings us to the feast of the Lord in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 2. So you may have had a tendency, in order to explain the biblical calendar, to start with Leviticus 23. But you can see that you need to respect all of these wonderful rules of correspondence by simply starting at the very beginning, chapter 1, verse 1. And this you have discovered. This is when the first time a calendar is mentioned with the word beginning, which God created. And that refers us to the science of astronomy and the science of mathematics. And of course, heaven to the science of astrophysics or physics, and earth to chemistry. But right now we're concentrating on time. So this is very, very important to recognize all these wonderful truths as we have looked now at the book of Genesis, Exodus, and Isaiah. Now we bring you to Leviticus. And looking at Leviticus, we see that the Creator himself says to Moses, "Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts." And these are particularly true having to do with the season, feast, convocation, and we have them here as number 4150 in Hebrew, again representing seasons. We continue with the book of Numbers, where you will find, after you have looked at Leviticus, and of course you continue with Leviticus 23, you will find the Sabbath, the Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, and then you go to the fall feast with trumpet, atonement, and tabernacles. We invite you now to look at the book of Numbers, specifically chapter 28 and 29, where you will find here again the same feast where it mentioned the new moon. It mentioned also the Sabbath, and it's all having to do with which sacrifice to offer on those particular day. So this is chapter 28 and 29 of Numbers, which many times people forget is also inclusive of the biblical calendar. Looking now at Leviticus 25, verse 4, but in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune that vineyard. And this has to do with the sabbatical year. 7 year complete, and then you come to the 7th year, then you will have the sabbatical year. Now we go to Leviticus again, chapter 25, verse 8. And this time when you bring the 7 years, 7 times, the 7th sabbatical year, you will get to another beautiful, beautiful feast. And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of year unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of the 7th Sabbath of year shall be unto thee 49 years. In another study, we show how to calculate the sabbatical year, which will bring us to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 9. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, which is the Day of Atonement. You shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land. So we have reached here the 50th year, which is the Jubilee. After the 49 years, 7 years sabbatical year multiplied by 7. Beautiful, beautiful. This we calculate them, we consider them as feasts. Those sabbatical year and Jubilee year are for the land. And they are to be respected, they are to be obeyed. Where you rest the land every 7th year. And then in this particular Jubilee, it's almost close to 3 years when you calculate it carefully, that the land has to rest. On the 3rd year, then you can sow, and then you will be able to reap at the right season. Now, the last quote that we want to show you, of course, is Daniel chapter 8, verse 14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The explanation of this wonderful prophecy is found in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27, which we give the explanation in other studies in the book of Daniel. This is to bring us now to another important study, and we encourage you very much to look at the wonderful spirit of prophecy, and specifically the conflict series. The first 5 books that we recommend is Patriarch and Prophet, Prophet and King. We have the Desire of Ages, Act of the Apostle, and the Great Controversy, where we have found many, many beautiful quotes, also helping us to understand further the biblical calendar. So as we proceed, we want to show you also the dates of 1844, and we have a whole page on that date. And this has been a discovery for us in 2007. As we were praying, a small group of us, 4 ladies, and we were praying to have further explanation on the biblical calendar, specifically for the 70th Sabbath, as some of us were already keeping the feast of Leviticus chapter 23. And we came about, as we studied and we prayed and we asked, the Lord gave us a way to obtain a collection that is based on the validity of October 22nd, 1844, the position of the Millerite in 1844. And this collection is called the Grace Amadon Collection, which we have here on our website in the menu under 1844. And here we recommend greatly that you start by this series here to read first the letter of conveyance, the introduction, and there are 6 parts actually divided here that you need to study first. But we went further and we were able to obtain further explanation of what we wanted because we had bought part of the collection. We paid for it. But then it was not a mistake. We're sure of that. Online, we found one day the whole collection, which we were able to upload. And here it is for you to peruse. It is quite a study. And it took us quite a while to study this from 2007. And then finally in 2019, that's when we were able to present the Biblical Calendar Movement. This is a website. We started in 2020 and we give you the date until 2030. This has no value as far as predicting anything. We're not predicting the second coming with those dates. We're simply giving you the biblical calendar. And it is based, of course, on the William Miller and the Millerite study, which you may want to visit here. This is a dream that William Miller had, which he saw a small trunk with a key and a large trunk. And the vision, it's a dream actually, and the explanation is given in Early Writing, the book of Early Writing, page 81, but we also have added some information regarding the difference between the small and the large trunk. So we invite you to visit these particular studies. They can take you forever if you like, but we have studied them already, and from this material, we have been able to bring together the rules of correspondence, both of synchronism and chronology, and also in order to establish the true biblical calendar on the premises of 1844, October 22nd being the Great Day of Atonement, which is an application of Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, the 2300 days, and also Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27 with its explanation. So we have definitely done our homework and we pray that you do the same. Now we will be taking you into another step on how to calculate the biblical calendar. So what we have here, of course, we encourage you to study those synchronism and chronology, which we find in the particular website of Numbers 1317. And this is found actually, it's kind of shown here. You can go from there to this particular file. This is where we should have started, file 25 of Numbers 1317. Enter file 25 at the very end, and you will come here to the synchronism and the chronology, and then enter once more, and you will find here the wonderful synchronism of the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a very special book because it is the book in the Bible that contains the most synchronism and chronology, 14 altogether. And through the study of the biblical calendar, we have been able to recognize those particular chronology, which is the timeline, and giving you in the study that we have presented here which day it was of the biblical week and which month. So you will be interested perhaps to study this, the 14 synchronism and chronology of the book of Ezekiel, and this is where we get our rules of correspondence in order to be able to set up the calendar for 2020 to 2030. As well, we're inviting you right now into, again, 144,000 teachers to enter, more particularly here, this section which we have called in the menu, movement. So as we look at this particular section, we scroll it down, and here we have agenda for every one of these sections on how to study the biblical calendar, but we start first with true education and the Savior. We are doing the 7 pillars of our faith, the sanctuary, the Sabbath, the soul temple, the state of the dead, which we have looked at, spirit of prophecy, and second coming. But particularly here we bring you to section 5, where we encourage you to study, study, study. Particularly here we are into the Sabbath and the biblical calendar. And you may have seen it once, but it may not be enough. These are the 2 particular video that we encourage you greatly to study at this time. This first one, Standing on Trial for Your Beliefs, As we said, we were going to give you more detail on how to understand the biblical calendar. Some of you will be questioned for your faith regarding the calendar. And you cannot count on anybody else. We will not be judged in group. We will not be brought to trial in group. So if individually you're called to speak for the Lord, you need to be grounded. So we encourage you to use this material. You can even use it in the court of law in PDF format, where you will have to give it for the court, for the lawyer, and for yourself. But you want to be grounded, because in the court of law, you're not allowed to read your material. You can explain it, but you cannot use it. And this is where we encourage you to have this material at hand and study carefully. In this particular video, we show you that there are more than one biblical calendar right now that has come out on the media. More than one biblical calendar. And so you have to be able to identify that it is a lunisolar, barley harvest, new moon on crescent, common or embollismic year intercalation, and it's also from sunset to sunset. We have done actually a test at the end, and the answer is right here. Some of you who have studied it, you have figured out. We do not give you the answer after the test, but the answer is here on page 5, where we bring you more and more information along the way of the common and embollismic year. And we want you to study this particular video, as we will be showing you shortly how to calculate a common and an embollismic year. And if you're not ready, if you have not studied carefully, you will not be able to understand what we're talking about. So we are repeating often how to recognize the biblical calendar. And if you study carefully, when you come to the great test in this particular video, which is right here, testing time, you will read all of these particular data, but they're not all exactly what they're supposed to be. There is only one true biblical calendar. So if there are 5 biblical calendars on the media, either the 5 of them are wrong, but they cannot all be right, or there is one right and the other are wrong. And this is where we stand. The others have to be wrong. You cannot have 5 right. You could have 5 wrongs, but you cannot have 5 right. So with this, we invite you to look at, again, the slide number 5, and this is where the answer is found. You have to study in order to be found approved, rightly dividing the word of God. When the religion of Christ is most held in contempt, when his law is most despised, then should our zeal be the warmest, and our courage and firmness the most unflinching, to stand in defense of truth and righteousness when the majority forsake us, to fight the battles of the Lord when champions are few. This will be our test. At this time, we must gather warmth from the coldness of others, courage from their cowardice, and loyalty from their treason. The nation will be on the side of the great rebel leader. Testimony for the Church, Volume 5, page 136. So the testimonies are very, very important because they give us a lot of guidance. Another video that we recommend greatly is the video which we showed you that you can get right here in movement of the website. And it's Computation of the Biblical Calendar, which we explain through astronomy and mathematics how we calculated 2020 to 2030. So we cannot repeat ourselves on this video. We are giving you the tools on how to be able to come to explain it. In this video, we go to great extent doing a step-by-step biblical calendar computation, again, of the true calendar, which must be lunisolar, barley harvest, new moon on crescent, common and embollismic intercalation, sunset to sunset. It cannot be otherwise. And we tell you what you need in order to get started, the data that will be used to compute the calendar, and etc. So we encourage you to study those 2 videos. Very, very important video, which you can obtain, again, we tell you, in the website 144,000 Teachers, and you go to the section Movement, and you go to the section where we study the Sabbath in particular. So here we're giving you, again, step by step, how to compute the biblical calendar. So we will not repeat ourselves in this video, but we want to emphasize the importance of knowing the fraction illuminated of the moon, for which is for observation. We also have the moon phases right here, the data of the moon phases, and we show you how to bring them together. So with the fraction of the moon and the moon phases, you can actually do the calendar. Remember, the fraction is for observation, where the phases are for calculation. And the Hebrew calendar was always calculated and observed. Some people only do calculation, some people only do observation. You're breaking the rules of correspondence if you do that. So be careful when you visit those websites. If you're not grounded, you will be taken away by falsehood. If you are grounded, these are based on the 1844 rules of correspondence, how 1844, 22nd of October was established. If you do not believe in 1844, some people who do those calendars do not, well, we're not on the same line here. We're not on the same spirit, so there is no reason to argue. We do not argue. We're teachers. So we teach. And if you do not believe what we teach, that's your privilege. We believe in the Bible, in the spirit of prophecy, and we believe in applied sciences. And we believe that astronomy is a very, very reliable science. We're not talking about astrology here. We're talking astronomy. And we also believe in chronology and in history, and of course the spirit of prophecy. So here we show you the fraction of the moon illuminated, and this time it has colors for which we give you the legend, so you can see here. So when it's yellow and when it's blue or green, some people say it's green, but you can see here we have the conjunction, and so you can read it. It says the phases occur between the 11th to the 23rd hour table in yellow or in blue, so we have it there for the both the fraction and both, and here the moon phases, so we use the same colors. All right, so we explain clearly also in here an apparent discrepancy that sometimes the moon phases do not correspond to the, which is the conjunction. We work with the conjunction with the moon phases and the full moon. You could do the first and the last quarter if you like, but that's a lot of data that for establishing the biblical calendar at this time. We have found that the conjunction, the full moon, and then of course we established the crescent moon. Then we have sufficient data to do the calendar. You can always refer to the first and the last quarter as you look at the calendar every month. So here what we have is, sometime we will let you know the discrepancy is that the phase of the moon in yellow here do not always correspond to the phase of the moon of the fraction illuminated. It is not a error. It is because we have found, as we studied the yellow numbers, then they're not quite the same in the fraction of the moon illuminated, because they're after the 11th hour. Just like the workers of the 11th hours, it's probably prophetic. When you look at these numbers, they're always after 11th hour or on. So 11th hour, which means that visibly, although this is the black moon, you want to see the moon. So visibly, you will not see the first visible moon if it is on the 11th hour or after. You will see it before 11th hour, but not on or after. And it's a rule of correspondence we have done now for more than, from the year 2019, that's when we started, and we went to 2030. We took away the 19 because it's past, but we go from 220 to 230 and try to do even those data per year, which means you have 24 data. You do it for 10 years. That means you have two calculated. If you have those data per year, so you have every month, you have your data for the moon and for the conjunction and for the full moon. So that's two data per month. 12 months at 24. For 10 years, that's 240 data. And then we're adding to it as we continue. We have done the Sabbath and we have done all the feasts the same way. So we have talked about thousands of data in 10 years in order to establish this biblical calendar. And the rules of correspondence stand for those 10 years as we have prepared those thousands of data. We could do it for 1,000 years now, following these data and following this legend. You can see our legend here. When the gray, that's the new moon conjunction. New moon conjunction, when it's yellow, you will understand as you study, the new moon horn crescent is always red. So we continue to present those data. So if you're not sure, come back to the legend. This website actually has the capacity to give you those format in PDF. So please make a copy, because it's very hard to study online, as you know, and you want those data in front of you in order to understand where we come from with these particular dates. So before you tell us we're wrong, you have to do your homework as well. That's what we recommend. So when you look at these data, thousands of them we have done only 10 years. You can imagine how many data we could do if we had gone further, but we simply received to do for 10 years. So here we have again 2019, 2020. So we have established also not only the fraction of the moon illuminated, the moon phases for the conjunction and for the full moon, but for the first and for the visible crescent, but we have also for the horn crescent, we have also done for you the Sabbath, and we have also done all of the feasts from 2020 to 2030. That's what you will find. So it is a lot of work. This is just showing you here for this particular year, 2019 to 2020. That's what we based ourselves on. And basically, that's showing you here all of the Sabbath, the new moon, and we have also the feast for that particular year. So we encourage you to study those two videos. One is the being questioned for your faith regarding the biblical calendar and establishing the rules of correspondence. And this one is the computation. How did we apply those steps that we are showing you in order to obtain the biblical calendar for 220 to 230? So it is a lot of work, and we pray that you take time to revise it, to study it, in order to also be able to give an answer. You would be allowed to use this material in the court of law, submit it to the court of law, and then you will have to be able to explain it. But you cannot read. You have to explain it verbatim. In seeking to cast contempt upon the divine statutes, Satan has perverted the doctrine of the Bible, and errors have thus become incorporated into the faith of thousands who profess to believe the scriptures. The last great conflict between truth and error is but the final struggle of the long-standing controversy concerning the law of God. Upon this battle we are now entering, a battle between the laws of men and the precept of Jehovah, between the religion of the Bible and the religion of fable and tradition. And this is from the Great Controversy, page 582. This edition is 1888. We are in 2022 as we speak to you right now in this video. So we know that the Lord has been very patient with us. This work could have been finished a long time ago. And we demonstrate in some of our studies, it could have been finished in 1888, in 1939, and in 1995. But the brethren who found out these truths that we have here, the brethren who had the material to study, they refused it. And this is why we're here today, to this day, and we are looking at this material biblically, astronomically, archaeologically, chronologically, and we're still here. So we need to finish this work, and historically, of course, and based on the spirit of prophecy, we need to finish this work in righteousness. And who will the Lord send? Answer like Isaiah, here am I, send me. So we do encourage you, because we have a lot to still understand, and particularly the comment and the embellishment here. So we're taking you again into this particular study here in the library, where we're going to show you a little bit further. Right now we have looked at the moon phases calculation, the moon fraction observation that we use for our data. And if you listen to these videos, we have worked to be as precise as possible with these videos, so we cannot repeat the same here, but we're recommending what you need to look at. The Bible, the Spirit of Prophecy, and the data of USNO, Her Majesty Observatory. This is good, but you need to know how to put it together. And this is what we have done. It has taken us years to do it, so don't take another 15 years to do it because we might still be here long. God needs a people ready right now. So what we have done here in this particular study, as we have showed you, is to prepare the common and the embollismic here. We want to show you this, the way we have been able to do it. And this demands of you a capacity to read numbers. If you're not very good with numbers, well, you may have a problem with reading all what's coming because we have more data to show you, and then we will take you to the final data of 1844. We will try to increase the fonts here for capacity of reading. All right, I think that's big enough. And here we have first of all, what we have done. These are data from the USNO. We have not altered them. We have edited them. And this is not from the USNO. You will not find these colors on the USNO, but these particular data, I don't know why, but they come where you can they enable you to use them in your computer if you have a good Adobe program, and you can change them. But we ask you not to do it with our material. Please do not alter anything. Like they say, make your own, but do not touch our material. And please be faithful to science. As a scientist, we can guarantee you that you are not allowed to change data. You're allowed to work with them, which is the principle of universal laws. And if you think those data are wrong, well, prepare your own. Study astronomy and figure out the fraction of the moon illuminated, but don't touch those. Some people have done it. Some people, to prove their point, have changed the data. Particularly, we know of the fact that they have changed the data of Her Majesty Observatory. So you don't do that. You're not allowed to do that in order to explain your point of view. You keep the science the way it has been calculated, and now you adapt it, and it fits perfectly with the Bible and the teaching of the Spirit of Prophecy, and more particularly October 22nd, 1844. We're very strict on that. Please do not fudge or do not speculate. Science does not work like that. And we're not necessarily, holding it against you that you have never studied science, but we have. And science stands. It's the way the Heavenly Father used to illustrate his universal laws. Now, how would you take 10 years and figure out if it's a common year or an embollismic year? Well, first of all, the rabbinical Jew who use the equinox do not have an embollismic year or an intercalation anymore. The Hebrew did. The Hebrew calendar and the Hebrew people did have an intercalation. It is not only biblical, it's historical as well. A second Adar, they used to call it, which was the name of the 12th month in Babylonian names. So when you come now to how do you figure out the common and embollismic year, you use the data of USNO, and you use the fraction of the moon illuminated to do that. Now, and you know that it's reproducing the phases of the moon as well. So the way we're going to do it is simply, we're going to give you an example, and you're going to have to go back at it, particularly this video, so you can see how we have done it. We can do it for the next 100 years. We follow the same rule of correspondence. So what we do, we may enlarge it a little bit more if the screen permits for you to see. We follow the red dots. All right, very good. We have it here. So we're going to follow the red dots. We're going to be doing the 2020, etc. We're not going to do the 10 years because once you have the rules of correspondence, you will see it always adds to each other. So this is from the USNO Observatory, the U.S. Naval Observatory, which we took on their website years ago. We have them until 2040, 2045. Those data, they do them quite a bit in advance. And they're PDF, so they're exactly the way they look on the internet. And you know that 0.00 in this reading is always a conjunction, and 1.00 is always the full moon. And that you would have seen that in the precedent video that we recommend. All right. These are basically the days of the month, Gregorian reckoning, and these are the month. So we're going to scroll it down a little bit more because we have a 31 day calendar. That's right. And here we have the day, the month. So we're going to start here in particular with the first month, January. Now, how do we know to find the conjunction, 0.00, the black moon, we're going to look for 0.00. So January is here, January is there, and you know now our code, if it's yellow, the moon phases of the data of USNO, they do not correspond to this. They will give you the moon phases as the 24th of January and the 23rd of February, etc. Here, these are the corresponding with the moon phases in gray. That's our legend. So, when you look at this now, you know the conjunction in January 2020, but we're interested of the month of March because of the equinox, which is around the 21st of March. It's not exactly the 21st, depending on the hours, but usually we say the 21st of March. There are two equinox, spring and fall. 21st of March, 21st of September, two solstices, June and December. June and December, and March and September. This is supposed to be equal day equinox, so March and September, and which is the spring and the fall. And then you have June and December for the solstice. All right, so these are astronomical data. We work with the equinox in particular to start the new year, the new biblical year. And that's what the rabbinical Jew to this day, they use also the equinox to establish the year, but they have changed since 325 AD, since it was imposed by the Roman. They have let go of the barley, which now they have no real season to base themselves on. They simply work with the equinox. And that's why at times you will find our data, just like in 1844, is a month later. It is not a mistake. It's because the rabbinical Jew today do not do intercalation anymore. They do not do an embollismic year, which is the astronomical terminology. So we have a common year and a embollismic year. 220, you will see why we have put at the top that it's common. We have added that. This is edited. You will not find this and the common and the embollismic on the USNO. This is the only plus putting the colors. All right. So here we have in March. We're going to look at the 21st of March right here. And we see that the new moon conjunction 0.00, we're not worried about the visible crescent of the new moon horn crescent. The visible is the first one you see. We're going to worry only about the conjunction right now at 0.00, which in 220 would have been the 24th of March. Now, in order to do the Passover, you need 14 days later. The way that the Jewish people today, the rabbinical Jew today do it, they will go to the next full moon, which here is 1.00, which we indicate for you here, and you will look at the 8th of April right here. If you see that, you're already set up to understand better. So this is when the rabbinical Jew would declare this to be Passover, which is good. It's around the second week of April that the barley would be ripened, so they're still good. And for us, we would be using the day after the full moon, according to Aristobulus and Gemini, which we have explained in other videos, but this is where we go. So the rabbinical Jew, they use the 15th of Abib, or the 15th of the first month, which is the Passover supper at sunset of the 14th. We, according to Exodus 12, we use the Passover on the 14th for the death of Messiah, the lamb that was offered at even, which is the evening sacrifice, which is around the 9th hour, from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. For some people, they would call it the 15 hours, and to 6 o'clock, that would be the 18 hours. So we here in Canada, we use 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a bit different, but it's the same thing. All right. So here, this is the way we would have done for 2020. This would be when we would say this is the Passover. And remember, it's always universal time. We showed you that with Her Majesty Observatory. We use the universal time. We do not use the central time, the Easter time, the mountain time. We use universal time, which is the third data of Her Majesty Observatory on the chart we showed you. And we also want to make sure that everybody sees it all around the world. Otherwise, you will have people keeping the Sabbath and the feast at different time. And this is happening today. That's the problem we have with, again, too many chief and not enough Indians, like they say. All right, so we have the 20, this is would be the 9th of April would have been the Passover. And then this is unleavened bread. You continue with the data with unleavened bread, and then you will find the next unleavened bread, which would also allow you to find Pentecost, and which would allow you to find the fall feast. But this particular website, we want to concentrate on showing you how we have done it. You go back to 220, and you will see how we have calculated all these data precisely. So that was just to give you a starter. The reason why we evaluated it as common is very simple, is because look how early it is in April. A common year will always be early for the Passover, like in this case for the Rabbinical Jew, and in this case for our calculation of the 14. Rabbinical Jew, they also use a different moon. They do not use the new moon on crescent. So that would make them a day before us if they use the visible or the conjunction, depending of the data, the way they calculate them. As we showed you, sometimes it can even vary from the USNO. So there are many rules of correspondence that you need to understand. We're following the 1844 rules of correspondence from the Millerite, because you will see that they took their data from the Karaites, which were a group of Hebrew people which stood against the Rabbinical Jew after 300 AD, when they decided to go for the equinox rather than observing with the barley and calculating it with the barley. And it can make a difference. It can make a difference, especially when it's an embolismic year. Common, it's about a day or so, but when it is embolismic, it can be as much as a month. All right, so now we have looked at a common year. Let's scroll down and let's look at an embolismic year. We'll find one. Sometimes there is two common in a row, but you can never have an embolismic double. Why? The moon is establishing that, not us. We simply read the data. That's all we're doing. We're not adding to the data, we're reading them. You have to learn to read the data. Again, the same rules of correspondence. 0.00 is the conjunction, and if we had done the full moon here, you would see 1.00. We strictly work with the conjunction here. All right, again, the yellow, you know now that it differs slightly a day later from the moon phases, because it's on the 11th hour or later, and it cannot be seen with the naked eye. They can see it with the telescope, but most people don't have a telescope, so we don't go with the telescope. We work with the naked eye, and the naked eye is observed one day later than the moon phases from the telescope, as we have shown here with our yellow. So again, let's look at March 2021, which we declare to be embolismic. And the reason is, as you have looked at before, here is the 13th of March, where we have the conjunction, 0.00. And we're going to look now at the next full moon, just like the Rabbinical Jew would do, which in 2021 would be right here in March. And if you look at it, we'll bring it back here to show you. It is March, and it would be on the 29th of March. Well, the 29th of March would be good if it was a new moon, but for a when we look at the Passover, it's way too early. Barley is never ripened in Israel until the second week of April. It's an agricultural fact. It's a rule of correspondence. God has two witnesses. He has the horn crescent in the sky and the barley on the earth. Two witnesses. In the eyes of two witnesses, you can see the horn crescent in the sky at the beginning of the year, and you should see the barley on the earth. If you don't see the barley, but you have a horn crescent, where you're going to have that for 11th month, you need to be grounded. And the barley will be your second witness on the earth. One in the sky, one on the earth. So now we're going to have to go to the next month, April, and see the conjunction when it is. Well, lo and behold, it's right here in April on the 12th of April. We can do that if you like, make it easier. So the 12th of April would be our next new moon, 0.00. And this one corresponds to the moon phases in 2021 because it's in gray. And we're going to look now at the full moon, which is quite late according to the Gregorian reckoning, but not according to the moon. And the moon is the one is appointed for season. It's the moon that you use for the feast, the Holy Convocation, the Solemn Assembly. 27th of April, would be the full moon at 1.00, which means that we keep the Passover the next day on the 28th, always the day after the full moon and not on it. So that's what you should find in our calendar for 221 if you want to check us out in the library and the section number 5. So here we have established the conjunction for April 2021, the full moon, and we have now the Passover. So of course the Feast of Unleavened Bread will be the next day on the 29th, which we have established from the Passover. And the last day of unleavened bread will be much later in May. And this is where people say it's too late. Yeah, too late corresponding to the Gregorian reckoning. But we only use the Gregorian reckoning for conversion to make it easier because we're still under that particular calendar in 2022. But it's not too late for the moon. The moon, we'll go by the moon, and the moon is the one that tells us when the 21st of the first one would be. And that would end up, if you calculate it carefully, this is the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, which would be here. So that's not too late. That's corresponding. We don't want that line there. We don't need that line here. Here, right there. So the 5th of May, 5th of May would be your last day of unleavened bread. It is not Passover, but it will still be okay. You could still have a Passover on the 5th of May, and it would make, of course, unleavened bread later, which is quite rare, but not so much. In 1844, as we show you the data, they were celebrating actually, well, they didn't celebrate it, but they calculated it as being the 3rd of May for Passover. Where with the rabbinical Jew, they were much earlier, which gave them a Day of Atonement on the 23rd of September, where with the Millerite, they came up with the 22nd of October. It was not a mistake. It was simply because the rabbinical Jew used the equinox in 1844. They are using it since 325 AD and on. But now we are using back the barley as it is prescribed under the Mosaic law. So, again, you have a choice. You can go with the rabbinical Jew. You can go with the other calendars. We're following these rules of correspondence, which were restored in 1844. So, we're giving you a lot of detail. Just listen to the video. We apologize if sometime we mention maybe April or May, but we're showing it to you so you know how to read it. You know that 0.00 is your conjunction. You need to find the 21st of March. If the full moon isn't within March, you know it's too early. You could not have a Passover in March. It has to be in April when the barley is ripened. But if you use the rabbinical Jew with the equinox, well, you will end up keeping the Feast of Passover right here on the 29th of March. And we have seen that in our calculation as we always go to the rabbinical Jew calendar and we see what they have done. They do not have intercalation, embollismic year, or leap year anymore. They do not, like the Hebrew calendar was. And we're not saying that offensively. This is scientific. They stand by it, and we stand by the barley. Now, we're going to take you further now. As we said, we have other videos that we have presented to you, the computation of the biblical calendar. But this, what it's doing here, again, is showing you how to compute it now, and we're going to include more data. We're including now the Sabbath, the new moon, and the feast, or you could say the new moon, the Sabbath, and the feast, and we start with 2019 here, but we're going to continue with 2000, and this is 2020. We're going to go to 2020, which is common, which we saw, and from having established if it is a common or embollismic year, which is your first duty before you can do this particular calculation. Now you're ready to put in. What you do is once you have established, for example, the easiest one, of course, is the Passover, which we have done here for 2020, the day after and not on it, the full moon. Now we put the unleavened bread, we put the first fruit, the last day of unleavened bread, and then we will be putting, we have Pentecost to establish, and we have also the fall feast. So now that you know how to read and you know how to calculate, and we had to do that. We had all the blue that you see here. These are the Sabbath according to our legend. It's right here. The 70 Sabbath are shown like this. When the Sabbath falls with the new moon horn crescent, we put a red beside it. You read your legend and go back to it. If it's a holy days, but you can do secular work, it's more like a yellow kind of a color. But if it is a 7-day, if it is a Sabbath, a biblical Sabbath that you keep as a Sabbath, then we have again this particular color because it will fall on the 7-day Sabbath. All right. The new moon is always in a pinkish color. So this is our legend that you will need to go back and forth. That's why we recommend you copy this material, put it side by side, look at our number, analyze them, see if you agree with it. If you don't, if we have made a mistake, we recommend you go to our 144,000 teacher.org website and go to the contact and send us a note in our email. We would really appreciate that. So please take time to study now. We cannot do it for you. We have done our homework, and if we have made a mistake, we would be happy to help to change it. If the year is past, well, the Lord cleaned the eyes at our ignorance. The book of Acts says that. But at this time, we have all the reason to be able to establish the biblical calendar with all those wonderful rules of correspondence. And we have another rule of correspondence here that we work with 6 months from April to September usually, where we have 3 months of 30 days and 3 months of 29 days. But the moon is the one that established that. And it's not necessarily a rule of correspondence we have found that may be always correct. So we're still in the process of studying too. But so far it has worked for us. For the past 10 years it has worked. So for the 10 years we have calculated. And we have kept the feast, of course, since 1990s. So the feast was calculated like that. But we never did the Sabbath at the time. We never celebrated the new moon at the time because we didn't know. So the Lord winked at our ignorance again. But now we know how to do the 7-day Sabbath. And it's not that complicated. As you know, for example, the first day of unleavened bread is always a Sabbath. Then we calculate for the unleavened bread the last day. It does not fall on a Sabbath. So it's just before this one here, the blue one is a Sabbath. Then we calculate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we marked it with our marker on the computer. And then we put here, now it's going to be the 0.00 is the conjunction. We have a Sabbath here, and that happens with the horn crescent following, and then we celebrate that one here. That would be a 30 days. When you have this pattern, is a 30 days. But when you have this pattern, like in the month of May, you have a Sabbath after your conjunction, which is right here. You have a Sabbath and the horn crescent together. Then you will be celebrating the first of the month right here. So you need to study the legend too. We have given you all the information, but if you want to trust us without studying, well, you might be in trouble when it's time to explain it. That's why we're recommending to study carefully. So the embolismic year and the common year, that's what you need to study first, to establish first. And this is what we have done with this study, where we bring you again to this page of the biblical calendar on 144,000 teacher in the library. And we're going to bring you now to another study, which has to do with, we have used here the monthly for 2022, 2023, because it's easier to see than the pamphlet. And again, that will take you for this coming year, which is, we have established it as a common year. So that's your homework now, to look why we have established 222, the end of 222, the whole of 22 was common. And we continue to scroll for the month of November, which is still to come at the time we're preparing this video. December, you will see there are 29 days here. That's what it shows here. When they're following each other like this, it's 29 days. The month of November would be, we're going to show you again, we're going to go back here a little bit. So the month of November would be 30 days. We do not make that up. This is coming from those charts that we have showed you here. This is how we come up with those charts, with the conjunction, with the new moon. Then we establish the horn crescent, and we're able to establish if it's a 30-day. So basically, we have data side by side, and we make up this calendar. So this calendar is the last work we do to establish and being a common year. So December 222 will be 29 days. When the two blue boxes are side by side, you can see. January will be 30 days, and then it's the new moon again. February will be 29 days. You can have 2 months of 29 and 2 months of 30. It's not us doing it. The moon does that. The moon always have either 2 months of 29, 2 months of 30, or 1 month of 29, 1 month of 30, and it continues its cycle again, all right? So you have to pay attention to that. March of 2023, again, we're entering a common year. March will be 30 days, and we're entering in March the 25th. It's not too early. The new moon, horn crescent, will be the 25th of March. Anything after the 21st of March, you have to start looking if 14 days later from that new moon, you would be able to keep the Passover according to the barley. It has to be the second week of April according to agriculture. The barley will not show up before that to be ripened. Remember, it's ripened. Why? Because Leviticus chapter 23 tells us at first fruit, a sheaf of the barley had to be woven before, presented before the Lord, we should say, and waved before the Lord, and it had to be ripened. It cannot be green barley. So, because right after the feast of Passover, unleavened bread, first fruit, then they were ready to get the harvest. So here we have the 25th of March would be the first. In 2023 will be the first of the new year, or Abib, the new moon. And then you follow with this, and you will end up, it seems early, but it's not. You will end up with the Passover on the 7th, which is will be the second week of April, as we say, the second, with unleavened bread on the 8th, and here first fruit, and here the last day of unleavened bread. It's very close, but the barley would be ripened according to the moon calculation here. All right, this is a common year. And again, how do we do the last feast, the fall feast? We do month by month, which will establish the new moon every month. That's the principal one, and the Sabbath. Of course, we have the Pentecost in between, which we teach you in another website, another video, how to calculate it. So here we're just simply showing you the common year and the embolismic year for this particular page. And this will bring us to the new moon which we have for 2023, which we have here in September, will be the 27th, the Day of Atonement. So the new moon trumpet will be on the 18th of September. It's not early. It's a common year. That's normal. And then atonement 10 days later. You look at it yourself. You will see how we calculated that. And then we come now for the last of Tabernacle, the 15th and the 22nd, the two last day of the feast, the fall feast. And then the new moon will be on the 30th. That will be a 30th day, the 7th month. The 8th month will be the 18th of October, etc., etc. So it is quite a bit of calculation. People think like, if it was from God, it wouldn't be so complicated. It's absolutely not complicated. It's very complex. And that's where people stumble. They think, if it was from God, it wouldn't be so complicated. Well, that's kind of diminishing my Creator. My Creator is the most intelligent person or mind that we will ever meet. And you want to be able to give him that respect. It is not complicated, but it has to be based on science, astronomy, mathematics in this case, but simple mathematics. If you can add and subtract, you're okay. So we're going to continue now with another presentation from the library, which we have already entered for you. And it's the calculation that you will find of our calendar in another format, which is the pamphlet format that you have here, because it's a brochure. It's much easier. The first one is what we show you here, it's the bigger format, like a calendar. But this little brochure here, it folds, and you can keep it in your, to carry easily. And this is again for 2022, 2023, which would correspond to the format we just showed you. If there is any mistake, you have to correct us, but usually it's we revise it many times before we show it to you. And these are identical format, okay? They're identical data, as we should say, different format. We could have done the embolismic here for, let us see here where we can find you an embolismic here. We're going to go back to the biblical calendar. We just did 22, 23. Let's see if 23, 24 will be embolismic for the monthly here. Let's pick up on the monthly. It will take a few seconds to open up. And we're going to finish the year, of course, November, December. We'll finish the coming year of 2022, 23, which is not the proper way of saying it for the biblical calendar, but we are using the Gregorian reckoning. Now, February, you start watching now for March, and you will see in March, again, we have looked at the data, and we can see the data that we have established as being the new moon on the 13th of March. And we have to look for the full moon on the 25th of March, which will be bringing us now, we cannot use that new moon. We have to go, and the 25th of March, the full moon, is too early for the barley to be ripened. It's the second week in April, which will bring up in April as a new moon on the 12th, as a Passover on the 25th, unleavened bread on the 15th, the first of unleavened bread, first fruit on the 16th. And now we have to go to May for the last day of unleavened bread. This is definitely an embolismic year. This is definitely an embolismic year. When you have feasts that touch on the month of May, Gregorian reckoning, you have entered now an embolismic year. So while 2020, 2021 were common, which is right, embolismic now will be the when we say 22, 23, I should say, was common, and 2021, now we have an embolismic year. Okay, so this will be embolismic 23, 24. And for the Jew, if they look at this calendar, they may choose to, and we believe that that's what they will be doing for their data, they will use the 25th as Passover. The reason is they never use an embolismic or an intercalation for their calendar, and for them it's too late. If they do it, it's because they have changed their calculation. But so far, since 1991, we have never seen, since we keep the feast, we have never seen an embolismic year observed by the rabbinical Jew or calculated. Because they do like us. Their calculation and observation are exactly the same principle. They have not gone away from that. They still use the moon. They do not use the sun. They use the moon. They use the equinox. They use the calculation that we do for the 7-day Sabbath, but the 7-day Sabbath, they keep Saturday oddly, but for their feasts, they keep the biblical calendar, but based on the equinox. So there are a lot of discrepancy in that, which we have discovered we cannot do that. So we have let go of Saturday keeping now since 2007, and we have kept Saturday since 1982, when we first discovered the Great Controversy. Previous to that, we were Sunday keepers. So you can see some progression from going from Sunday keeping to Saturday keeping as Christian, and now we are keeping the biblical Sabbath. And people say, but it changes every month. No, it does not. It changed because you're comparing it to the Gregorian, but when you compare it with the moon, it's very faithful. The moon is a very faithful witness. If you study the data properly, you will understand. In 2024, Pentecost will be on the 18th of June Gregorian reckoning. So we could do 2025. We will show it to you for the sake of data to make sure that you understand that 225 will be a common year. Why do we know? It's because we have never seen the moon having two embolismic in a row. So we're going to go to 225 now. 224, 225. This was 24, 25. So we're going to go 25, 26. So this is very important to know those things. So this is a common year. And we won't go any further. You can check it for yourself. You're never going to get 2 of these months in a row embollismic. You can get 2 common, but no 2 in a row embollismic. So right now what we'd like to show you is another important study, and we're almost done with the computation of 1844. And we give you an explanation, and we actually have a video on the explanation of 1844, which is right here, which we have already prepared for our presentation. And we follow the same basis: astronomy, mathematics, and we follow the same. We were blessed to find, you can find it on the USNO. It's 1700 years data behind. And we have seen here 1844. We're going to make it a little bit larger to make it easier to read. And here we have it. So we prepared it exactly the same way with our rule of correspondence with the 11th hours, sorry. And we're going to scroll back here a little bit. So the 11th hours, you can see in 1844, universal time, this is 1844, universal time, we have established it as an embollismic year. Would you be able to answer why now? Well, what you need to do is to look at the month of March. In the month of March, the moon, the conjunction would be 0.0000.17, which meets the rule of correspondence of before 11th hour. So it should be corresponding to the fraction of the moon illuminated should be on March 19, if we're correct. So now we're going to go to March for the new moon. On the fraction of the moon illuminated, we can enlarge it a little bit more because it's really small. Very good. And we're going to scroll it a little bit this way, or push it a little bit this way. Sorry. Okay. All right. Let's go this way. It's a bit complicated. Sorry about that. But we're doing a demonstration, so bear with us. All right. So we have here established 1843 was a common year. We've done it in order to show you the data, because the month of March was the new moon for 1843 would have been, the full moon is on the 16th of March. The new moon would have been on the 31st of March. So this, both the Rabbinical Jew and ourselves, we would be using the 31st of March for the month of April, for the new moon conjunction and establishing the crescent. And we would be able, at the full moon, for the Rabbinical Jew to celebrate their 15th of Aviv, or first month, on the 15th of April. And us, we would have kept, we put it in a different color. This is the Passover in 1843 that the Millerite would have calculated in order to establish 1844. It's good to have a few years around, and that would have been a common year. That's before, that's on time for the barley, but it's way before the end of April. In the case of 1844, we have established it as being embollismic, intercalation, or leap year, because the month of March, the full moon would have been the 5th of March in 1844, which is really early in the month of March. You cannot use that one. The conjunction would have been in March the 19th, and we would not be able to use that conjunction for the full moon, because the full moon is the 3rd of April. However, the Rabbinical Jew in 1844 used the 3rd of April as their 15th of Aviv. It's a fact. They have used it, and that's why when you go for the 7th month, which we show in our calculation how to proceed, you need to add. It's not that complicated. You need to establish all your new moon, your horn crescent. You need to establish all your feasts, and then you will figure out how the Millerite did it, which, by the way, the Millerite were helped by a Karaite Jew converted to, he was helping them to calculate this calculation, so he was helping them to convert, at the time, the Gregorian calendar to the biblical calendar, and that's how the Millerite, the name of the gentleman was Elder Frey, and he was able to explain to the Millerite how to calculate from the Karaites using the barley. So we have a very, very good source that is the ancient Hebrew calendar, the Mosaic Law calendar base. And so when you come up with April, then on the 3rd, that's not what the Millerite would have used. The Rabbinical did, and that's why they come up with the 23rd of September as their Day of Atonement, but not the Millerite. The Millerite, they would have used actually this new moon right here, which in if it is the 18 here, we look at the month of April. The 18th of April, that would have been the new moon. And if you were to look at, we're going to go back quickly here to our chart. Why is it a little bit later? It's because in April the 17th, 1844, the new moon conjunction shows 1632. The rule of correspondence is it has to be before 11th hour. This is 16 hours and 32 minutes. It's too late to be seen from the earth with the naked eye. So the Millerite, they had known this because that's exactly their data that you will find in their writing. They used actually, we'll stop here. They use actually the next day, the 18th. That's what it shows in their data. And they probably didn't have any fraction of the moon illuminated, but the U.S. Naval Observatory existed in 1844, so they have used the USNO for their moon phases, and that is shown in the collection that we're showing you in our website in the menu under 1844. So please refer to that website and that 1844 study, especially the 6-part series. You can choose to read all the other material, but the 6-part series is a resume of all the material they have used to come to that conclusion and more. And it's all coming from the Millerite, not from that team of 1939 who did that research. All right, so here we have April. So you can see the full moon is late, according to some people. It's all the way here in May. And if you look at the data of the Millerite, they would have actually said that the night of the Passover would have been on the 3rd and celebrating it on the 4th, although they didn't celebrate it. But the 4th would have been the day of celebration. The calculation would have been the night of the 3rd. All right? So when you do all the rest of the data like they did, that will bring you then in October with the new moon on the 12th. And then the 13th in the evening, that's when they would have recognized the horn crescent, celebrating then the trumpet, if they did celebrate it, but they just calculated it. They calculated it as being, let's show you here, the 14th day as the celebration if they did, but it's the night of the 13th. So if you're fair with the date of the Day of Atonement, which is always the 10th, Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month. So we're going to calculate from the 13 now and see. 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, 21, 22, 22, 23. So this would have been the 22. That's when they would have calculated the second coming, which it did not happen because they made a mistake with the sanctuary, the court, and the sanctuary being the earth. But in fact, Jesus was entering the most holy place after the great disappointment. We saw that this was the application of Daniel 8, verse 14. The 2300 days finished, and it was the Day of Atonement, the starting of the judgment, the great Day of Atonement, the antitypical day. So here, they were expecting Christ the 22nd. And if they had celebrated the Day of Atonement, they would have kept it again from the sunset to the sunset, which is exactly the way we calculate our moon. We do not keep it the same night, the same day that we find the moon. We keep it sunset to sunset. That's when you see the moon, that's when you keep it. That's when you see the moon, that's when you keep it, etc. So basically here, that would have been a Sabbath if they had kept it like that, but they did not. All of the Millerite practically were Sunday keepers. A few may have been Saturday keepers, but none of them were biblical calendar keepers. This is the complete restoration of the biblical calendar after centuries because of 325 AD and the decree of Nicaea, which the papacy intends to celebrate in 2025. That's when the calendar was completely changed and messed up. But in His mercy, the Lord gave the Millerite how to restore the calendar. It's not a new one. The Hebrew kept it for centuries. So did Adam and Eve and Abraham. And when you look at the Bible, Isaac and Jacob, even in the Bible, it says that Joseph kept the Feast of Trumpets. So they kept the feast. And so did Abraham and all the patriarchs. So here, this is the biblical calendar. Remember, we saw from new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, we will come and celebrate, worship, and serve the Lord on this particular time. on the new earth. So why not start practicing now? So this is the restoration of the wonderful biblical calendar. We try the best we can. Maybe it's again too fast, or maybe it's too many details, but that's why you have to do your research, your homework, which we have presented earlier with this particular study here. You need to start here. You can, and start even with the Bible, as we show you here. So read your Bible, retain those verses, write them down. This is not a PDF format because it's done from, we're using another form here to do this video, because to do a PDF, we would have to do a PowerPoint, which is impossible to do with all this explanation of data, as we have to compare data. So please take time to study, revise this video, and then you will be able to come to the conclusion that 1844, they were right with the embalming year, because they were using the barley and coming with the Day of Atonement on October 22nd. The rabbinical Jew, they actually observed the Day of Atonement on the 23rd of September. And this would have been right here, the 23rd of September, which would give them, let's see if we're right, yeah, that would be the 23rd of September, which in those days they were keeping Saturday anyway for their Sabbath. But if they had calculated it properly, which is always the 10th of the 7th month, according to the barley, they could have seen that it was a mistake. The 10th of the 7th month can never be a 70 Sabbath. It is a Sabbath, it is observed as a Sabbath, but it is not a 70 Sabbath of the week. So where the Millerites were on the 22nd, which is right here, the night of the 22nd, that's when they expected Christ. If they had kept the Day of Atonement, they would have kept it as the 22nd. And remember, the 23rd of October is false biblically, because we go sunset to sunset. And because of the midnight to midnight is messing up everything. But if we talk biblical way, the 10th of the 7th month in 1844 was really corresponding to the 22nd of October. So we have definitely attempted to rest our case again in the court of law. And in the court, you may have as long as you need if they see that you know your material. But do not expect that you can use an hour and a half without being interrupted. Absolutely not. You will be cut off, and you have to be able to get back, keep in control of your explanation, so that you win your case. And the winning of the case may actually end up for you to be killed, because they may not agree with you, but you will have vindicated the Heavenly Father. And by God's grace, you may have been witness for some people who may come at the last minute into this truth and accept it, and also die for their faith. You may live as well, but you may die. This is what is coming to us. So count the cost, but we believe that some of you, maybe not all of you, but some of you will have to answer for your faith in the court of law. And in some other video, we show that it's not going to be where you are. You might end up somewhere in the Netherlands before the World Court, which we have a video showing that. And that we believe we can back it up. The World Court is not in your own country. It's in Europe. And so we close now. Thank you for your patience. We're going to close with the wonderful promises of the Lord. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish out from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you. And you know the commandments are also containing the statute and the judgments, and the statute are given to protect the 10 commandments, of which Leviticus 23 with the feast protects the 70 Sabbaths. Revelation chapter 22 verse 18, for I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And then we have the last one, which completes it. If any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. May the Lord bless you as you patiently and willingly will go back to this wonderful study and ground yourself both intellectually and spiritually, that you shall not be moved, and then you will be sealed in that truth. That's the only way you can be sealed, is if you are intellectually and spiritually grounded. And that's the work of the Holy Spirit. So pray much as you study these. And if at times it's a bit fast, well, you can slow down, and we give you also in the Google here, you can check our where we get all our quote. We find always material to basically demonstrate, not prove. We're simply demonstrating what the Heavenly Father has already declared. May the Lord bless you as you continue to study faithfully.